realized really quick that this was going to be a very meaningful, healthy experience. My life was chaotic, but it was also beautiful as well. I'm very fortunate and I guess relatively privileged human being. The problem here was that I was taking for granted that privilege and not living in accordance to my value sets. Living in some depth of resentment for some of the things that I didn't get when I was young. For example, I had an alcoholic father and a very relatively depressed mother from her traumatic upbringing. That being said, we didn't have to worry about money very much. So a lot of it was more emotional stuff. And I also was married for a number of years. And I was also very fortunate to have been able to excel in some of the things that I love to do. One of those things was being able to not only be married to a beautiful, loving person, but also to be able to experience some of my passion, which is I'm a musician, and I was able to survive and support myself in that world. A lot of good things, but also I think a lot of opportunity for me to be a little bit more grateful and respectful with what came my way. Actually, through a really good friend of mine. We had reconnected as adults, and he started to get interested in mycology and started to experiment and grow, have a room and conditions where he could grow his own magic mushrooms, as well as the idea of going out and foraging for mushrooms as well, edible and medicinal. Hearing some of the stories and seeing for firsthand the transformation he was experiencing and the commitment to understanding this more, I had started to experiment a little bit as well with magic mushrooms and would notice some of the profound beauty in those experiences. It would start out with recreation. For me, it would dive more into more existential kind of stuff and understanding about myself. That's where this started to happen. But always under this circumstance of like, we're just having fun here was the intention, as opposed to a real proper set and setting, but then would lead more into like a more philosophical vision about what are we really doing here. And I think that was what really started getting me interested more into the psychology of what this could do for me, but never really in a proper container that was able to flourish, let's just say. One level would be a deeper understanding of the nature of existence, why I'm here, what I'm meant to do. And then the other, just more pure healing, less anxiety, this anonymous anxiety inside, looking to connect more to this feeling of the greater good. This is an experience that came to me somewhat by accident and also at the same time with intention. Let's start with the intention. The intention for me was to surrender to self-inflicted pain and grief, and that is through the power of addiction. So the intention for me was to go away somewhere and learn a little bit more about myself and my body and how to get more connected to said self and body, and learn a little bit more about the power of meditation and breath work, working with somebody that could help me with that. So what I signed up to do was to leave my life. And so I went on a trip down to Mexico where I signed up for, I believe it was a week of a holistic wellness retreat, working with a fellow by the name of Anjay and his organization called Pura Vida. And that's where I started to learn how to talk about my feelings and my story and start to learn how to be in the present moment, which is referred to as mindfulness meditation, and learned how to actually really breathe with intention. It sounds very simple, but it's very healing. And I was very well taken care of there. Everything was left out of my diet that I was doing, no meat, no caffeine, no alcohol, no drugs, beautiful vegan diet every morning. And I was also introduced to this idea of sitting and learning how to breathe with intention. Just that act in itself is learning how to be mindful and becoming the witness and learning that I'm not my thoughts. It was very, very powerful. Just that aspect itself. And starting to commit to this process and seeing the transformation already, the symphony of the wilderness, being in these places where it's just the birds, the ocean, the smells. And so I was already in preparation and already having an experience. And I would say that I was already starting to have what would be referred to as spiritual awakening. The other side, the accidental side, was one of the employees there. She was part of a community and they were having a ceremony. And it wasn't planned for me to do this ceremony as part of my treatment there. But because of what I was going through, the opportunity that came up, this type of just accidental serendipitous event, we decided to make that part of my treatment. And we made the trip from the coast inland to this women's community and to have a ceremony that I could take part of. And I'm very honored to be part of the ceremony too, because the ceremony was conducted because the shaman of the community had passed away and his community wanted to do a special event for him. And I was invited to that event. That's when I learned that it was going to be a 5-MeO DMT ceremony. And it was told to me that this could be a very profound experience and could be very healing. And I had heard about DMT from my friend I told you about, and I was very cautiously excited. I talk about the community because this is really what was part of the beautiful experience for me before anything else. Was I knew that I was going to be going there with somebody that already built a relationship with, that was caring for me. Her sons were there. She had told me that her son had already had an experience on this medicine to help get him back connected to the earth instead of being connected to endlessly to technology, and told me about his transformations, about being so much more connected to the earth and wanting to be outside more after these experiences, and how her other son was going to come and be part of this ceremony as well. And when I got to the compound, it was very, very beautiful place and very, very conducive to this type of work. And I was very happy to know that when I got there too, there was aunts and uncles, family members, all taking part of this. I realized really quick that this was going to be a very meaningful, healthy experience. The shaman, who was a doctor as well, a medical doctor, wanted to make sure that my intentions were pure before I was going to be allowed to take part of the ceremony. When I explained my story, then I was allowed into the ceremony. That was a really beautiful setup for me because I was a little bit cautious. Now, the experience itself is very difficult to talk about. These things are often very ineffable. This is a very intimate ceremony. These are conducted in these ways where everybody gets a turn and everybody else holds the space. And that was very interesting for me too, because that was another thing. I was like, oh, okay, we're not all going to do this together. So I had mixed feelings about that. Ultimately, I understand why. Being in this place and feeling welcome and a beautiful setting in Mexico on a beautiful day out in the wilderness around a circle. Not only was there the shaman giving the medicine, there was also a team that was going to be taking us through that journey. And that looks like this. There was a woman that was burning sage and dancing, and then there was a musician who was playing guitar and singing, and they would both sing and they would kind of take you through that journey. Given the fact that I had been primed and had done a little bit of work with intention and learning how to kind of let go and be the witness, as it were, and had been practicing for a good week about how to actually just connect with my breath and let go of any attachment to thoughts was really important for me in this journey. When I was delivered the medicine, I completely surrendered to the care of the facilitator and followed the instructions. Given the fact that I had experience with substance abuse, that it was very obvious at first, when I first started medicine delivered, that he was going to have to give me a pretty big dose. And I say that because I want to be clear about sometimes it's hard to completely surrender to something like this and to feel like maybe it's not going to work for me, or there's something wrong with me. It's going to be different for me, or I'm broken, and it's just not the case. It's just everyone's different. It just says something to say about experience. I had lots of experience, not in the way that was conducive to a healthy lifestyle with proper care and proper substances, proper medicine. The journey itself was very, very profound. All I can say is when I was given the DMT, the 5-MeO DMT, the bufo crystal that was you smoke, the first thing I remember is a very remarkable taste and smell. Next thing I remember is you just fall to the ground. And from there, it just kind of everything changes. This experience was completely warm and completely beautiful. Now, I could say that there was lights and tunnels and all that stuff, because I think there was, but that might just be a fragmented memory. What's important for me to share is that I felt completely at one with consciousness. There was no separation from me and everything else. The real connection to the one, and I like to say now the Ekankar, the one, the creator is the one, is one thing. What I do really stands out for me, and this is why important I want to share, is everything that came to me, I allowed to happen. I didn't think about it. It was complete ego loss. There was no thinking about it. And this is why I really set this story up, how important it is to have some preparation for these types of experiences, to do some work with the body and some meditation and some breath work. And because what had happened for me is that it just kicked in. I didn't say anything. I just let it happen because I was primed. I just allowed for everything experience to happen. Think about just kind of rolling into the next thing. So I had an experience. It could be in a wave of beautifulness or of light, warm light. I didn't think about it and say, what's this warm light? I just went, warm light. And then the next thing would happen and I would roll into something else and I would be part of the earth and rolling in the earth. And I didn't say, that's weird or that's strange. I'm rolling in the earth. I'm earth. I just went, I'm earth. The important thing that I'm trying to get across is I allowed myself to enjoy and experience everything as it came without any question or thought or critique. One thing that I did miss was the cathartic primal scream. When I hit the ground, when I fell over, was the first thing I did was I screamed as loud as I could in complete ecstasy. And I remember it being the most beautiful feeling I've ever experienced in my entire life. It was like everything I'd been carrying, every worry, every hope, dream, every regret was all released in a wave or an explosion of recreation. And that for me, this was kind of part of what this set up the experience. And then from then, that's where the wave of acceptance, the wave of non-judgment. This journey is very difficult because the awe and the numinous and the ineffable kind of things. But from what I've already explained to you, then what happened though is the beautiful thing that actually happened next was that I somehow was able to then take everything that was happening and remember that I was in a form again. And so what I did with that form is I'm very kind of somatic in these ways, and being a musician, and I love to dance and sing. The music all came back, and so my form, being what I am, needed to move, and I started to dance in like complete flow, completely free and self-expression. I remember spinning, and it was just a celebration of understanding without having to understand, if that makes any sense. And that's the letting go part, I think, for me. The back end part of this is when I started to kind of come back to this type of awareness that is our society, I guess, and this type of consciousness. And I started to get a little bit of a broken heart. And so I sat there and I just opened my palms and my hands, and I was looking at this woman, to me seemed like was having so much of a cathartic release, and hoping and praying that was healing. And I remember saying, I can take some of that from you. And the interesting thing that happened after that was that I started to then not feel as wonderful as I felt before. But I reminded myself that I was taking some of her pain. And that was pretty profound, because then it kind of enabled me to sort of not be so personal, invested in. I took on someone else's pain, possibly. I took on something I didn't need to. I think in that moment, and I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now, is that I was committing to who I really wanted to be. And that's what I realize now from one of the big things about this experience, is that I realized in that moment that I was signing up for something that maybe not wasn't going to be easy, but it's who I am. I want to help people. That experience helped me kind of realize that was the strife, that was the shame, and that's what I referred to as well about the not living in congruence with my value set. Something's missing. Oh, it's that giving back, helping others. In the moment, I didn't have any idea that was what was going on. In the moment, I thought, I took on somebody else's pain, and I'm not prepared for this, and now I'm going to have to deal with it. Back into that experience was very difficult for me. And I want to share that because this may happen. And I remember first and foremost thinking, oh dear, now I'm chasing this train. Now I'm chasing this dragon. And that was a low. But I'm glad I did, because I think I needed to experience that, to say, oh, you've been given a choice now. Is this going to be your new salvation? Your new God, your new escape? This is the most ineffable experience I've had in my entire life. At first I was like, I just want to go back. And then I realized, wow, you were just given a gift. And that's when I settled in and said, okay, no, you're okay. Let's just breathe through this again and settle into normalcy. Because these experiences, we want to be able to blast off, but we also want to be able to integrate them back into a normal life. And that was a beautiful thing. What tied it all up was that when everyone had their experience, then we all danced together in community, and then we had a circle, and we all did the circle of friends and all held hands and gave thanks and gave respect to the earth and to the medicine and to the spirit and to their dear friend that had passed away. And one of the leaders came up to me and said, you're home now. This is I'm part of this community. And he meant that. But what he meant was that you're back to who you really are, and you're home with us, because we're all on that search together to be happy, whole, and healthy as part of the land. I made sure that when I went back to my regular life, that I continued to meditate, do breath work. I also would meditate on the experience, and I also chose to use some of the same scents. So I started burning some sage, and that would bring me kind of back into that experience a bit, and music and dance. I think the most important thing would have been to meditate on that experience, try to incorporate what I could understand into purpose into my life moving forward.